There's a moment after betrayal that almost no one talks about. It's not the anger, it's not the tears, it's the strange, quiet stillness that comes after, when the noise settles and you're left alone with the truth of what happened. You might look completely fine on the outside, but inside, something has shifted. Your trust, your softness, your sense of safety. It all feels a little different now, and if that moment feels familiar, this video is for you. Betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It changes the way you see people, the way you love, the way you protect yourself, and for a long time, it can feel like something precious was taken from you. But here's the truth most people don't tell you. For high-value women, betrayal doesn't end the story. It transforms them, not into something colder, not into something bitter, but into something clearer, stronger, and way more self-aware. You don't glow because you were hurt. You glow because you survived the truth and refused to abandon yourself afterward. So today we're talking about why high-value women often shine the brightest after betrayal. Not in a loud way, not for attention, but in a quiet, grounded, unshakable way. And if you're a Sigma female watching this, you'll feel this on a deeper level because your strength has never needed an audience. Stay with me. Here are 9 psychological reasons high-value women glow. Hardest after betrayal. 1. They stop negotiating about their worth. After betrayal, something clicks. A high-value woman no longer explains why she deserves loyalty. She just expects it. And that shift alone changes everything about her energy. High-value women glow hardest after betrayal because something deep inside them shifts. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not some sudden, wild comeback moment. It's quieter than that, almost invisible at first. It starts with a simple truth settling into their bones. They stop negotiating about their worth. And this matters because before the betrayal, they often tried to meet people halfway. They softened their tone. They explained their intentions over and over. They tried to understand someone who barely tried to understand them. They made room for excuses, moods, and inconsistencies, not because they were weak, but because they cared, because they believed connection was worth the effort. But when someone betrays that care, something inside a high-value woman upgrades. She realizes that any relationship where she has to argue for basic respect is already too expensive. She sees that love should not require her to shrink or twist herself just to feel chosen. She becomes aware that her energy is limited, and giving it to people who treat her like an option drains her in ways she never noticed until she finally stepped back. So after betrayal, she stops doing the emotional math she used to do. She no longer asks, "Was I too much?" or "Was I not enough?" She drops those questions completely because they were never the right ones. Instead, she starts asking, "Why did I let myself negotiate things that should have been non-negotiable?" And once a woman asks that question honestly, her entire standard of living changes. She becomes more intentional with her time, more aware of who gets access to her, more real about what she needs. She doesn't lower the bar to keep someone. She raises it to keep herself. This is where the glow begins, quietly but powerfully. She becomes harder to manipulate, not because she's cold, but because she finally trusts her own judgment. She becomes harder to impress, not because she's arrogant, but because she no longer entertains the bare minimum. She becomes more confident in her silence, more steady in her decisions, and more selective with her yes. A high-value woman who has stopped negotiating her worth does not chase clarity from someone who disrespected her. She doesn't reopen doors she closed. She doesn't beg for closure. She knows that if someone needed her to suffer to appreciate her, they were never meant to stay. And if she's a Sigma female, this shift becomes even more noticeable. She goes from quietly accommodating to quietly unavailable. She becomes the woman who doesn't audition for love, attention, or approval. She simply exists in her full presence, and the right people rise to meet her. Betrayal didn't teach her to be harsh. It taught her to stop settling. It taught her that her worth is not a debate, not a discussion, not a negotiation. It's a fact. And once she knows that, her glow becomes impossible to dim. Hold up for a second. If any part of this is hitting home, tap the like button so I know I'm not just talking into the void. All right. Next point. 2. They detach from anything that drains them. She stops chasing answers and starts choosing peace. That calm detachment makes her glow from the inside out. Something changes in the way a high-value woman manages her space. She starts noticing things she used to overlook. Tiny comments that once felt harmless now feel heavy. People who once felt familiar now make her feel tired. The places she used to fit no longer feel like home. It's not that she becomes cold or difficult. It's more like she becomes aware, almost suddenly, of how much energy she has been pouring into things that gave her very little in return. So she pulls back, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She detaches from anything that drains her, and the shift is so subtle that most people won't even catch it at first. She stops replying out of obligation. She stops trying to fix conversations that fall flat. She stops pretending she doesn't notice when someone only shows up when they need something. It's not anger driving her. It's quiet relief. It's the feeling of finally putting down a weight she didn't realize she was carrying for so long. This detachment isn't about distancing herself from the world. It's about choosing what feels safe, steady, and honest. Before the betrayal, she might have held on longer than she should have. She might have brushed off red flags because she believed things would get better. She might have forgiven too quickly just to keep the peace. But once she's been hurt deeply, she becomes more protective of her energy. Not guarded, but intentional. She stops investing in people who treat her emotions like background noise. She stops forcing warmth into places that have already gone cold. She doesn't chase after explanations. She doesn't rehearse speeches in her head. She simply steps back and lets things reveal what they were the whole time. And if she identifies as a Sigma female, this shift feels even more natural. She's always moved differently, always preferred depth over noise. Betrayal just accelerates that instinct. She becomes even more selective about who gets close, not because she's trying to be mysterious, but because she knows that emotional peace is fragile. She's not willing to hand it to someone who hasn't proven they can hold it. So she cuts off the small leaks in her life. The friend who only calls when she's bored, the relative who masks criticism as concern, the partner who wants presence without accountability. She doesn't announce anything. She doesn't throw shade. She doesn't create chaos. She just quietly releases what no longer feels healthy. And in that silence, she gets stronger. A woman who detaches from what drains her becomes more grounded in her decisions, more honest about her needs, and more loyal to her inner balance. People may say she's changed, but the truth is, she's finally acting in a way that matches her heart. Betrayal didn't make her distant. It made her aware of what was never supporting her in the first place, and once she lets go of everything that drains her, her glow starts to look less like recovery and more like freedom. 3. They rebuild their confidence from the ground up, not for revenge, not for show, but because walking around feeling small is not in her nature. After betrayal, a high-value woman doesn't just wake up one day feeling confident again. It's not some instant rebound or a sudden burst of strength. It's slower than that. It's quieter. It's the kind of rebuilding no one sees, because most of it happens in moments she doesn't talk about. She starts by admitting to herself that something inside her feels cracked, not destroyed, just unsettled. And instead of pretending she's fine, she sits with it. She lets herself feel the sting of losing trust in someone she once believed in. That honesty becomes her starting point. When she finally looks at the pieces, she notices something she didn't see before. Her confidence wasn't broken by the betrayal. It was built on things that were never stable to begin with. Maybe she depended too much on reassurance from someone who couldn't even reassure themselves. Maybe she tied her value to how well she loved people who didn't always appreciate it. Maybe she thought loyalty would protect her from disappointment. When that belief breaks, she's forced to rebuild differently. And this time, she chooses to build her confidence from the inside out instead of the outside in. She starts reconnecting with parts of herself she forgot. The hobbies she abandoned, the routines she postponed, The dreams she kept saving for later. She doesn't rush it. She just adds one small thing at a time that makes her feel like herself again. It might be cooking a meal she loves without worrying if someone else likes it. It might be going for a walk and realizing she enjoys her own company more than she thought. It might be journaling late at night and telling the truth she used to swallow to avoid conflict. Slowly she begins to trust her own voice again. She starts believing what she says instead of doubting it. And when she looks in the mirror, she stops searching for the version of herself she was before the betrayal. She knows she isn't going back to her old self, and that's not a loss. It's progress. Her confidence grows in small ways. She sets boundaries she used to avoid. She says no without guilt. She stops explaining things that don't need explanations. She listens to her intuition without asking someone else to confirm it. And if she's a Sigma female, this process feels even more natural. She's always had an independent streak, always felt comfortable standing apart from the crowd. Betrayal just reminds her that she was built to stand on her own legs, not someone else's promises. Her confidence doesn't return with loud declarations. It returns with quiet choices: eating better, sleeping better, speaking softer but meaning every word, showing up for herself even on days she feels shaky. She becomes more stable, more steady, more sure of who she is and what she brings. Betrayal didn't give her confidence. It stripped away the parts of her identity that weren't real, so she could rebuild something that finally feels honest. And that's why her glow hits differently. It's not performance, it's self-respect. 4. They learn to trust their intuition again. Betrayal sharpens a woman's instincts. She starts hearing the quiet signals she once ignored, and Sigma females feel this especially strong. After betrayal, a high-value woman begins to notice something she ignored before, the small nudges inside her that tried to warn her. Not in a dramatic way, just soft signals she brushed off because she wanted to believe the best in someone. Maybe it was a tone that felt off, a story that didn't quite line up, or a feeling she pushed down because she didn't want to seem overly sensitive. She remembers those moments later, and they sit with her in a way that's almost uncomfortable. Not because she blames herself, but because she realizes her intuition was speaking and she wasn't ready to hear it. So after the betrayal, she pays attention differently. It's not paranoia, it's not fear, it's awareness. She listens to that quiet inner voice she used to doubt. She stops forcing logic onto situations that don't feel right. She stops trying to rewrite the truth so it fits the version she hoped for. She learns to stay with that first feeling, the one that shows up before excuses and explanations get in the way. And it doesn't happen all at once. There are days she still second-guesses herself, days she wonders if she's being too cautious, days she feels guilty for being protective of her peace. But with time, she starts noticing she's right more often than she thought. She picks up on patterns quicker, she identifies manipulation sooner. She steps back from people who use confusion as a shield, and slowly, trusting herself, stops feeling risky and starts feeling natural. That's when the glow begins to show in ways that don't look obvious but feel undeniable. She stops walking into situations hoping they'll be different this time. She walks in already reading the room. She notices the energy behind words, not just the words themselves. She pays attention to how someone makes her feel after the conversation, not just during it. Her body becomes her compass, her instincts become her filter, and when someone's energy feels off, she doesn't wait for proof. She listens, she pulls back, she protects herself without asking if she has the right to. A Sigma female feels this shift even deeper because her intuition has always been strong. She just learned to mute it so others wouldn't call her distant or hard to understand. But betrayal reminds her that her instincts were never the problem. Her instincts were trying to save her from giving too much to someone who couldn't meet her halfway. And once she accepts that, her relationship with herself changes. She stops apologizing for being cautious. She stops feeling bad for walking away. She stops allowing anyone to talk her out of what she knows deep down. Her intuition becomes her anchor, not her weakness. She moves quieter, but she moves smarter. and the confidence that comes from trusting herself lights her from within. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a way that feels steady, grounded, and impossible to shake. Quick pause. If you're still here, you're clearly a woman who feels this in her bones. Drop a comment with a single word that describes your glow right now. Okay, let's keep going. 5. They protect their softness without losing it. She doesn't harden. She just gets wiser about where she places her heart. That balance between softness and boundaries gives her a magnetic presence. A high-value woman begins to understand something she never really had to think about before. Her softness is not the problem. The world often tells women to toughen up, act detached, speak less from the heart, and pretend nothing gets to them. But she knows that isn't her. She's soft because she cares deeply. She loves with intention. She shows up with sincerity. And betrayal hurts her precisely because she wasn't playing a role. She was real. But instead of letting the pain turn her sharp or closed off, she learns a new balance. She protects her softness, but she doesn't lose it. She becomes more intentional about who gets to experience the gentle parts of her, not because she's being dramatic, but because she understands that softness is valuable. Not everyone knows how to hold it. She stops offering emotional warmth to people who never earned it. She stops comforting those who only show up when they're in trouble. She stops being the safe space for someone who made her feel unsafe. And at first, this shift feels strange. She worries she's being too guarded or that she's changing in a way she doesn't like. But with time, she realizes she's not becoming harder. She's becoming smarter about where she places the parts of herself that took years to grow. Her softness becomes something she chooses, not something she gives away automatically. She learns to pause before she pours her heart out. She observes how someone treats her before she lets them see the more tender parts of her. She listens to the tone behind their words, the consistency in their actions, the way they handle her boundaries. If something feels off, she steps back. If someone shows respect, patience, or genuine care, she opens up slowly, in her own time. That slow opening is how she protects herself without shutting down. Her glow shifts too. It becomes a softer kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything. She can be kind without being walked over. She can be supportive without being drained. She can love without sacrificing her dignity. A Sigma female feels this especially strongly. Her softness was always quiet, almost hidden, and betrayal pushes her to protect it even more fiercely. Not by locking it away, but by guarding it like something rare. She stops trying to save people from themselves. She stops absorbing other people's moods. She stops feeling guilty for not being available every second someone reaches out. Her softness becomes something earned, not expected, and that changes the way people approach her. Those who only wanted her warmth without giving anything back drift away. Those who value her presence stay and show it. And she finally sees that loving carefully doesn't make her cold. It makes her honest. She learns that kindness doesn't mean allowing chaos into her life. It means choosing peace, even when she has every reason to shut down. Protecting her softness doesn't dim her glow. It sharpens it, giving it edges that keep her safe, and a warmth that still feels genuine. 6. They stop explaining their decisions. No long speeches, no trying to be understood. A high-value woman simply moves, and that mystery, it glows. After betrayal, a high-value woman eventually reaches a point where she no longer feels the urge to justify her choices. Before, she used to over-explain because she wanted to keep the peace. She wanted people to understand her intentions so there were no misunderstandings. She wanted to make sure no one felt hurt by her boundaries. She cared, sometimes too much, about how her decisions were received. But when someone breaks her trust, she learns a hard truth. People who are committed to misunderstanding her will twist her words no matter how carefully she speaks. People who value her will understand her even when she says very little, so she stops giving long explanations that drain her. When something no longer feels right, she steps away. When she needs space, she takes it. When a relationship feels uneven, she lets it fade, and she doesn't write essays in her mind trying to defend herself. She doesn't wait for approval. She doesn't second-guess her reasons. Her choices come from a place of clarity now, not fear. The shift is quiet, but it's noticeable. She starts answering questions with simple truths instead of long stories. I don't feel comfortable with that. This isn't working for me anymore. I need to move on. No extra layers, no emotional cushioning, no trying to make everyone happy. And at first, this new simplicity feels strange. She worries she sounds cold. She worries she's being too direct. She worries people will get the wrong idea. But then she realizes the only people bothered by her honesty are the ones who benefited from her silence. Everyone else adjusts. They respect her decisions. They don't push. They don't demand explanations she no longer offers. And this gives her something she didn't expect: peace. She didn't know how much of her mental space was being swallowed by rehearsing conversations, apologizing for things she didn't do wrong, or trying to manage how others perceived her. Betrayal cuts through that noise. It teaches her that the right decisions don't need defending. They simply need to be made. A Sigma female feels this shift even more intensely. She has always made choices based on her own inner compass, but she used to soften them to avoid looking unapproachable. Now she stops watering down what she feels. She doesn't hide the truth just to make others comfortable. She doesn't drag out situations that drain her. She doesn't spend time convincing anyone that she's allowed to walk away. Her silence becomes part of her strength. The fewer explanations she gives, the more she trusts herself. And that trust becomes visible in the way she moves, the way she speaks, and the way she chooses her life. There's something calm about a woman who no longer explains her decisions. It's not pride. It's not attitude. It's acceptance. Acceptance that her choices don't require permission, and her peace doesn't require negotiation, and that quiet confidence is exactly what makes her glow from within. Before we move into the next part, make sure you're subscribed. I want you here for more moments like this. Now, let's go to the next point. 7. They choose themselves without guilt. She picks her peace over other people's chaos, and the moment she stops apologizing for that is the moment her light gets brighter. It wasn't intentional. She just cared in a way that made her forget to check if she was running empty. She stayed up late trying to fix things that were already breaking. She forgave people who didn't ask. She stretched her emotional capacity to meet others where they were, even when no one tried to meet her halfway. And she didn't complain, because part of her believed that love meant patience, compromise, and giving people grace. But then betrayal hits, and it hits in a way that forces her to see who was giving and who was taking. She starts replaying moments in her head and realizes she let certain things slide because she didn't want to be too much, too sensitive, or too demanding. She kept the peace, even when it cost her. And the weight of that realization is uncomfortable, almost embarrassing, because it shows her how far she drifted from her own needs. But something new grows from that discomfort. She finally chooses herself, and this time she does it without guilt. She starts by taking back the small pieces of her life she once gave away too easily. Her time, her attention, her emotional space. She doesn't offer them automatically anymore. She becomes selective, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. When she wants to rest, she rests. When she needs a day to herself, she takes it without writing long explanations. When she feels drained, she steps back before she reaches a breaking point. She stops feeling bad for protecting her peace. She stops apologizing for not being as available as before. And she stops saying yes when everything inside her is saying no. At first, she feels uncomfortable doing this. Choosing herself feels selfish only because she spent so long ignoring her own voice. But after a while, something shifts. She notices she's breathing easier. She notices she's sleeping better. She notices she laughs again without forcing it. Her life starts to feel calm, steady, and hers. She realizes people who truly care about her don't punish her for having boundaries. They don't guilt-trip her into giving more than she has. They don't treat her needs like inconveniences. And the ones who do fall away naturally. A Sigma female understands this even more deeply. She has always been someone who walked her own path, but she used to bend parts of herself to keep others comfortable. Betrayal snaps that pattern. She chooses herself fully, and she does it with a quiet certainty that doesn't need defending. Her glow becomes softer, more grounded. It comes from a place of alignment, not effort. Choosing herself is no longer a last resort. It becomes her default. And the moment she stops feeling guilty for prioritizing her own well-being, she steps into a version of herself that feels whole, calm, and finally, honest. 8. They upgrade their circle. Betrayal makes her look around. Who supports her? Who drains her? Who claps when she heals? She keeps the real ones close and walks away from the rest. A high-value woman starts seeing her relationships through a different lens. It's almost like the experience strips away the blur she didn't know was there. She used to excuse certain behaviors because she believed people were just going through things or didn't mean it that way. She let some friendships drift in and out of her life because she didn't want to seem difficult. She kept connections alive simply because they had history, even when the present felt empty. But betrayal shifts her perspective. It teaches her that history doesn't equal loyalty and familiarity doesn't equal genuine care. She starts paying attention to how people show up for her, not just how they talk. She notices who checks in without wanting something. She notices who listens without turning the conversation back to themselves. She notices who sits with her in her silence instead of rushing her to get over it. She doesn't make a big statement about it. She doesn't call anyone out. She simply starts categorizing people differently in her heart. Some move closer, some drift farther away, and some are quietly let go. It's not revenge, it's alignment. She realizes her circle should feel like home, not like a room she tiptoes around in. She lets go of friends who only celebrated her when she was easy to love. She distances herself from people who dismissed her feelings or laughed at her vulnerability. She stops entertaining people who loved the idea of her strength but disappeared the moment she faltered. And yes, this part can feel lonely at first, not because she misses the people, but because she misses the version of herself who believed they were good for her. But over time, the loneliness softens. It becomes a kind of quiet clearing, a space where the right people can finally enter. She starts attracting people who understand the value of emotional balance. People who apologize when they're wrong. People who don't compete with her or drain her. People who are honest, steady, and consistent. And when she meets them, something in her relaxes. She doesn't have to over-explain herself. She doesn't have to dim parts of her personality. She doesn't have to pretend she's fine when she's not. These people see her humanity and don't weaponize it. They respect her boundaries without getting defensive. They speak to her with clarity instead of confusion. A Sigma female especially thrives in this upgraded circle because she's always needed depth over noise, sincerity over chaos. She feels more grounded around people who don't take her solitude personally and who don't chase drama as a form of entertainment. Her glow shifts again. It becomes warmer, calmer. Not because her circle is large, but because it's genuine. Betrayal didn't make her suspicious. It made her selective. She stops letting everyone into her inner world. She understands that access to her heart is a privilege, not something handed out freely. And the people who remain, the ones who still show up after her standards rise, become part of a circle that supports her growth instead of draining it. 9. They rise without announcing it. There's no loud comeback, no dramatic speech, just quiet consistency, quiet discipline, quiet evolution, the kind only a high-value woman can pull off. A high-value woman doesn't make a big show about putting her life back together. She doesn't post dramatic updates or tell everyone she's working on herself. She's too tired for that, too aware of how much energy she already spent trying to hold together something that wasn't meant for her. So she moves in silence, not out of pride, but out of self-preservation. She realizes healing isn't a performance. It's a private process, slow and uneven, filled with days where she feels strong and days where she feels like she's starting over. She learns that real growth doesn't need applause to be real. It just needs consistency. So she keeps going, even when no one is watching. She changes small habits first. She wakes up a little earlier. She stops checking the phone she once waited for. She gets back into routines she abandoned because she spent so much time managing someone else's chaos. Nothing she does looks dramatic on the outside, but it feels different on the inside. She starts choosing actions that make her feel grounded instead of approved. She speaks less and observes more. She sets boundaries and doesn't explain them. She listens to her intuition and doesn't argue with it. And the people around her may not even notice the shift at first, because she's not loud about it. She's not trying to prove anything. She's simply moving forward. With every quiet decision, she becomes lighter. She starts to realize she's no longer glued to the past the way she once was. She doesn't obsess over the wrongs or search for hidden meanings in conversations that ended months ago. She stops replaying old scenes in her head. The past becomes something she remembers, not something she carries. Her rise isn't fast, it's steady, like a tide coming in. The glow people eventually notice isn't from makeup, a new outfit, or some sudden makeover. It's the glow of a woman who finally feels like she belongs to herself again. She smiles differently, softer, more real. She talks differently too, slower, more measured, less apologetic. She no longer fills silence with nervous explanations. She sits comfortably with herself. That's the kind of rise that can't be faked. A Sigma female rises in an even quieter way. So here's what I found. High-value women shine after betrayal because they finally return to themselves. Not the version of themselves they showed to keep the peace, not the version they softened to make someone else comfortable, but the version that existed before they learned to second-guess their own voice. They stop shrinking just to fit into places that never made room for them. They stop explaining choices that were never anyone else's business to begin with. They stop waiting for someone to tell them they're allowed to walk away, allowed to rest, allowed to start over, allowed to want more. And what's interesting is that their rise doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with loud declarations or dramatic exits. It comes in quiet adjustments, small choices, and subtle shifts that slowly pull them back into alignment with who they really are. It's a rise that whispers instead of shouts. But even in its quietness, it's impossible to ignore. You see it in the way they speak with more clarity. You see it in the way they protect their time without guilt. You see it in the way they move with intention, choosing peace over noise, choosing honesty over hope that someone might change. Their glow isn't something they perform. It doesn't come from trying to prove anything to anyone. It's not about punishment or revenge or making someone regret what they did. It's about presence. The kind of presence that comes from knowing yourself, trusting yourself, and staying connected to your own truth, even after someone tried to break it. Betrayal doesn't give them the glow. What gives them the glow is the choice to rebuild in a way that feels solid and real. They come back to themselves piece by piece, and that return is what makes them shine in a way that feels deeper, calmer, and more grounded than before. If you've ever gone through a betrayal and came out stronger, tell me what shifted for you in the comments. Not the polished version of the story, but the real moment that made you look at yourself differently. Your story might be the exact thing another woman needs to hear while she's still in that quiet, heavy moment where nothing makes sense and everything feels too sharp. You never know who might feel less alone because you shared something honest. And if you want more content that feeds your strength and helps you stay connected to your own center, check out the next video on the screen. I keep this space gentle, steady, and real, so you always have somewhere to land when life gets confusing. Trust me, you'll feel seen.